I think we're just getting started. Starting a franchise is a tricky endeavour. On the one hand, no one knows what to expect, but at the same time, there has to be a certain level of familiarity for it to be enjoyable. This is especially true for video games, which I guess leads me to Halo Combat Evolved, a game that defied convention and did many things before others followed suit. Allow me to elaborate. The opening scene shows a large military ship, the Pillar of Autumn, approaching a mysterious ring-like structure. It becomes clear that they are being pursued by the Covenant, an enemy alien race, as they barely escape the planet Reach, as they stated. After waking from cryosleep, the Master Chief is tasked with escorting Cortana off the ship before it's completely overrun by the Covenant, as they are already boarding the ship. After escaping, you land on the ring world and step out into this unusual world. The Chief then proceeds to group up with other Marines who made it off the Pillar of Autumn before it crashed. The Chief soon finds out that the ship's captain, Keyes, has been captured by the Covenant and is being held on board one of their cruisers. He quickly gets to work assembling a squad and sets out to save Keyes before he can be interrogated or killed. It's here you learn that they call this ring-like structure Halo, and it's a weapon with unspeakable power, and if the enemy figure out how to use it, everyone will meet their doom. Obviously they need to find out where to control such a structure from, so they set out to find the silent cartographer, which acts as a map to the ring's activation room. After acquiring this intel, the Chief and Cortana make their way to it, where they learn the truth about the ring. After losing contact with Keyes, the Chief must find him before it's too late. Alone, the Chief makes his way through a swamp into some kind of underground structure. It's clear there's something more to the ring than you thought. After reaching an empty room splattered with the remains of a Marine squad, Chief watches a helmet cam and discovers a deadly alien parasite has broken loose, known as the Flood. After escaping, he becomes acquainted with 343 Guilty Spark, who states he is the monitor of the ring. He teleports them to a large structure they call the Library, which houses the key to fire the ring. Spark states that only a human can activate the ring, so requires Chief to turn the key. After the ring fails to fire, Cortana explains she stopped it herself, and that the ring will destroy all life in the galaxy, not just the Flood. Cortana hatches a scheme to destroy the ring as it is too dangerous to leave, as Spark may find a way to fire it without the Chief's input. The only way possible is to detonate the Pillar of Autumn's remains, as they are the only thing that would have enough power to destroy the ring. However, only Captain Keyes has the authority to do so. After locating him, you discover he is still alive. But after a botched teleport and a long battle through the ship, he's being held, it's too late. The Flood have converted him. The Chief rips out the chip in his head containing the access codes for detonating the Autumn. They make their way to the crash site and start the countdown, but Spark has also found his way there and stops the countdown himself. The Chief then has to manually detonate the engine's core using explosives, leaving just minutes to get out. Barely escaping before it explodes, the ring is destroyed. The Chief and Cortana are the only ones who made it out alive, and some guy called Dustin Echoes. And every legend has to begin somewhere, and this legend hit the ground running. Obviously no one knew what a hit Halo would be, and planned for it to be a standalone game if it wasn't a success. And in honesty, I'd have been glad either way. Halo 1 offered an experience unlike any of the others in the series. However, it did lay the groundwork for what would follow. Obviously, it introduced series regulars including the Master Chief, Cortana and even Sergeant Johnson. All the characters don't feel as if they don't belong in the game. All of them play their part, and you don't forget them because they're written as memorable extras and nothing more. The first one is also unique in a sense that it's the only one to simply be about a setting as opposed to an in-depth story like the others are. And it's also refreshing how the story progresses. Every new mission offers something different from the mission that came before it, such as introducing new weapons, vehicles and even new enemy types. It was also the first to do many things within the FPS genre, such as only allowing the player to carry 2 guns at once, dedicated vehicle sections that require mandatory driving or flying. Obviously, other games did feature drivable vehicles, but none of them had patented sections that you could call a vehicle section. Not to mention its vast open environments that hadn't really been done before. Obviously, because it was the first in the entry, there was a lot of things that weren't quite as good as they could have been. Firstly, a real complaint is how inconsistent the checkpoints are. You'd have many playthroughs where you get one every time, but then you'd have one where you get past a certain point and fail to be reverted back like 10 minutes worth of the level. This issue was largely fixed in the later entries, but you really feel it sometimes in this. And I feel like this was the only one to get the difficulties just right. Legendary is actually balanced. It's challenging, but you don't need to rely on luck like within the other entries, but with one notable exception. People often refer to the library as the worst level in the game, but I personally disagree. 2 Betrayals grinds my gears every time I play through it. It's just too long, and the amount of bullshit RNG flood combat forms with a rocket launcher is ridiculous. This level honestly could have been much more enjoyable if it wasn't so bloated. Obviously, it was mainly a single player experience, and I couldn't help but notice a few things within the story that simply don't work. Firstly, if the Covenant wanted to stop the Chief and co from entering their ship, why not just disable the grav lift instead of sending down troops to fight them off? And obviously Guilty Spark is kind of useless at teleporting in the library. Why not just teleport straight to the top instead of wasting valuable time running up the lifts? He states it's at utmost importance to contain the outbreak. And lastly, actually needing a human to activate the ring is a bit of a crap design flaw when you think about it. I mean, how could the Forerunners who built it possibly have known that mankind would even discover it? Of course, like with most other entries, there was a multiplayer mode, and I do enjoy it. It's very satisfying owning the enemy team, or even winning a free-for-all with a 10 or even 15 point lead. And you can easily find yourself hooked for hours. But that's not to say it's all perfect. I think there was a lack of variety in game modes. There was only 4 game types, but each one of them is just as fun as the other. Also, a lot of the maps have god-awful spawn points, and you'll just get spawn trapped by the opposing team, along with some of the maps being extremely unbalanced and some of them just being poorly designed, like Longest. But in all fairness, I'm willing to overlook these shortcomings, as it was the first time for the series. It definitely succeeded in many places, especially in being such a fun game, but it also left something to be desired in other places. Obviously, we had CE Anniversary, but to be honest, it could do with a proper remake instead of just better looking textures. But at the same time, I'm glad they didn't alter the gameplay in any way. But without Halo 1, the legacy of couch multiplayer wouldn't be what it is today, and the legend of the franchise wouldn't exist either. And that we should all cherish. Well, I think that about covers it. Signing off.